Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of the Podiatry Legends podcast. With me today is Sarah Clark from Sarah Clark Consulting. Now, Sarah is a healthcare consultant who helps independent medical practices transform chaos into calm, which is always a good thing. With over 2 decades of experience, she uses her 4 P's to success framework: people, patients, paperwork, and processes. I don't think you can fit any more P's in there to optimize practice efficiency. And I'll point out that Sarah was referred to come on the podcast by Big Jim Mack. It's Jim McDonald that I do the podiatry marketing podcast with. So Sarah, welcome to Podiatry Legends. How are you doing?
I'm great. I'm great, Tyson. Thank you so much for having me. And a big shout out to Big Jim Mack for the referral. He has turned out to be one of my favorite people.
He is a funny guy. I've never met him live. We almost caught up in Chicago last year, but it just didn't eventuate.
We had an online relationship also for a little while, and I was able to get him to come to a meeting in North Carolina last year for the Foot and Ankle Society of North Carolina, and he got him to actually be able to give a presentation.
Oh,
And then
cool.
they booked him for some additional meetings to come and give some additional presentations for that same organization, which then he met some other people. So I'm super happy that I was able to have that. So I was able to meet him in person also. He's real.
Yeah. I remember a conversation I had with him because we've done like 150, 160 episodes together with podiatry marketing, and he'd been on this podcast a few times before
Mhm.
that. And I remember when he was talking about a year or so ago, I'm going to start going out to a few more podiatry conferences. And I think that's one of the advantages in the US. It's like every state seems to have its own podiatry conferences. There's 50
Yep.
states. So there's a lot of events that you can actually pick and choose to go to. And then some of the states have multiple conferences. So uh, it's a great way to network with a lot of other people in the industry.
Yeah. And as you know, podiatrists or other physicians love to hear from other physicians, right? It gives them instant credibility that they have knowledge of the business, right? Oh, he's a podiatrist that does this podcast. He's a podiatrist that does marketing.
Yeah.
Oh, let me sit up a little further and listen more to what is it that he's got to say versus if just not Big Jim, just regular Jim went in and had this and had same information, same presentation, but they might not sit up quite as much because, well, he doesn't get me. And so it's really nice for somebody that gets them to understand the life cycle of a patient and what that clinic and what a business looks like in the healthcare space.
No, I think there's nothing more important than people who have just get it, that understand what you're going through. So if you've been a podiatrist and you're talking to a podiatrist and you're explaining, they're telling you a problem and you say, well, this is what I found when I went through the same thing, they can actually relate to it. So I think that's really
Absolutely.
helpful. I think that's what helps Big Jim in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. He has instant credibility because he's got DPM after his name, which is fantastic.
He told me he's not that big though.
He's not. He's the right amount of size. But his
Uh,
knowledge is big, and that's what's important. His marketing ideas are, I say they're big. They can make a big improvement for people's practices, which is, I think, what you talk about a lot of stuff of is like, how do we make big improvements for your podiatry practice, whether you're a big practice or a small practice, and whether you're in Australia or in the US or somewhere else. I know you're going to I think you've got a course you're teaching in Liverpool or something
yeah,
in
yeah, in
February, right?
February.
So whether it's in UK or I just took a trip for my birthday to Belgium. So whether it's in Belgium, right? So there's those healthcare providers, they're in wherever they are. Business is business. Regulations might vary from country to country, but the experience for the patient and for the provider and for the people that work in those offices need to be top notch because people will just leave, right? You're the best. You talk about it on one of your episodes. I think it was like a dual episode, like the 13 things I wish I would have done differently if I could do it again in my business.
Yeah.
And one is, oh, they know me. I'm the guy. But if somebody opened up across the street from you, what would you do different?
Oh, there,
No,
that
they
was that
referred
was
it.
that episode. Yeah, that was like 13 things you would do if somebody opened up across the road from you who had the same skill set
Yeah.
but actually had a big marketing budget, or do
Yeah.
you
And
do
what, yeah. And
differently? And
what
if
would
you
you do
would do
differently?
that, then why aren't you doing it anyway? It should just be
Yeah.
something that you actually do.
Yeah. I think in the life cycle of a patient, the life cycle of the people that work in your office, if you don't have a good training, we talked before the show, you're talking about an experience you had with an orthopedic surgeon.
Yeah,
Well, knew in a minute that you were not going to go back and see that same doctor. But if the people were trained to make sure that that didn't happen for you, if the doctor doesn't care about his impression on the patient and that's part of the care, then why is that person at the front desk going to care about how they necessarily treat the patient, right? Or why are they going to take any pride in their appearance if the doctor
doesn't.
doesn't up and it's all about appearances, right? If it appears that they don't care, they might care, they might be really good at what they do, but nowadays it's the whole experience, right? It's from beginning to end. It's from whatever that first touch point is, which could be the website that Jim has designed for you, or it could be a phone call, it could be the referral from your primary care doctor there, it could be a health fair, it could be just the sign on the street. Whatever that first touch point is, all the way through to what does the waiting room look like? How is that person interacting with you at the front desk? Did they explain your financial responsibility appropriately? Maybe they didn't know the answer, but they were really kind and got back to you. What did the examination room look like? How long did you have to wait? What was the doctor's demeanor? What was your checkout process? And what was your follow-up like? Did you just leave the office and you had a decent experience, but then you never heard from them again? Are you
Mm.
diabetic and you should go to see them once a year and they never do a recall on you? And so now you don't have that patient and they go, well, I guess I'll just call this other guy because I pass him on the way to the grocery store and it seems a little closer. They never called me from there, so I guess I don't have to go back. There's so much that is just involved in the entire experience for the patient. And if we don't have those tools readily available and user friendly for the patients, they'll go somewhere else. My experience is in US is I can do anything online. I did nearly my entire trip that I went to Belgium online. I didn't have to go somewhere. I booked my flights, I booked my tours, I booked my hotel. Everything is done online. When I got to the airport, I checked in online, I did my bags online, I upgraded my seat, whatever is all online. And you've got a patient that can't change their appointment and they can only talk to somebody between the hours of 8:30 and 4:30 Monday through Friday, or they can only pay their bill that way. It's lags behind and it makes it hard to run a business that way, but that's the way we always did it.
Well,
So
when I told you before about that orthopedic surgeon that I saw, it was the whole experience was terrible. But then I took my daughter recently to a sports doctor, and it was the exact opposite experience. Seeing the sports doctor, parking was simple. The clinic looked beautiful. There was so much space in the waiting room. He ran on time. He came out. He looked like a sports doctor. He looked fit. He looked healthy. He spoke in plain English to my daughter. And then when he found out I was a podiatrist, all of a sudden he elevated the conversation when he spoke to me. You could see the enthusiasm that he wanted to actually get into it in a bit more detail.
mhm.
Everything about it was fantastic. And I left there, got home, said to my wife, if I need a sports doctor, I know exactly where I'm going. But
Yeah,
at any question, yeah. And obviously, when I do my marketing workshops, and I mention about the whole patient journey, and I said a lot of podiatrists don't realize sometimes by the time you've shook that patient's hand, they might hate your guts because there's
absolutely.
all these things that may have really annoyed them before they ever got to you, and you go, and you can't figure out why.
Yeah. One of the things I tell at my workshops that I lead is the doctor is only as good as his staff,
Mm,
because that's ultimately who the patient interacts with more. So if you've got, no, you might have somebody that's really good at, say, collecting the money, right? But maybe they're not really good face to face with people. So
mm,
maybe they're not the right person to sit at the front desk, maybe they should be on the phone to the people, and you should have somebody that's better, right? Doesn't just because they're not good, they make a bad impression in a particular spot. Maybe they're really good at a skill set, but maybe they're just not sitting in the right seat. So sometimes you have good people, sometimes you just don't have
Well,
good
I know
people.
sometimes I jokingly refer to you walking into a doctor's surgery, and don't you just love it when you meet the lady at the front desk who's been weaned on vinegar her whole life, and she just looks at you with this sour face, peers over her glasses, and will say, "Doctor will be with you soon," and then just totally ignores you, and you sit down, you go, "I just feel like I've been violated," and
It's a funny way to say it. Yeah.
yeah,
Weaned on vinegar. I love
yeah,
it.
just been weaned on vinegar her whole life, just bitter and twisted, but. And I know you're in the US, so podiatry in the US is a bit different to, say, the United Kingdom and Australia. A lot of podiatry clinics, if they're sole practitioners, the person at the front desk is doing everything, is
Yeah.
doing a lot
That's
of
where we
tasks.
struggle.
Yeah. Whereas I know in America, a lot of them, they'll have different people at the front desk to do different tasks.
Yeah, so it depends on the clinic. The size clinics that I work with primarily are relatively small, 1 to 5 providers, so maybe
Okay.
even a micro practice. I do focus with podiatry because I have a lot of contacts there because I worked in an executive role in that area. So when I decided to go out on my own, which was accidental, it was a natural transition, right? But one of my clients, it's referred to as age management,
Age
which is
management.
just, this Botox and things like that, right? But we're managing our age, right? That's a cash business. So I have multiple different types of clients in there, but I do deal with a lot of podiatrists. But ideally, I'm going to work with practices that are 1 to 5 providers, and a lot of them fall in the 2 to 3 range. And in podiatry, that's a decent, like a 3 is a decent size. If you've got 5 doctors in one clinic. Now they might have multiple locations, but that's for privately owned, not somebody that's sold out to private equity or something, but that they own it, the doctors themselves. That's a decent size for the US. And those people that sit at the front desk may also be the manager of the office. So, which doesn't mean that they're running reports. They don't know what their KPIs are. They don't know what if they're getting paid the right way. They don't know a lot of those things. Generally, what happens is they've been promoted to that position because they were the ones that's been there the longest. So they
Or
know
they sleep with
how.
the boss.
I haven't run across that yet that I'm
Oh no, but
aware
I
of,
mean in a
thankfully.
positive way, like they're married. Like a
Oh,
lot of the
oh
times,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry. Geez,
Yeah.
if anyone's just
Woo.
turned off and gone, oh, we're going to report this podcast.
Podcast.
This is
People were
terrible.
like, "Oh, this is going to be juicy."
Yeah, but it's more
Yes,
along the
and
lines
that's
of some practice managers. They were married to the podiatrist, and that's how they end up being the practice manager because
absolutely
they were
yes,
there from the
because
start, married to the
they're
podiatrist.
trustworthy to look after the money,
Yeah, and they took
right?
on that,
They're
and that role just made sense. That they, not like my
yeah,
wife was pretty much a practice manager in my podiatry clinic when I had it.
yeah, very common.
She was awesome, just absolutely awesome. Nobody had after that came close to how good she was, but it's because it was also her business.
Right. There's
So
different things.
yeah,
Yeah, there's an ownership, and that's some of the stuff that I try to teach to people. Do you want to be the business owner or do you want to be the doctor?
yeah,
Because like you can still be the business owner, but you've got to let loose some of those things. And I think you talk about that on some of your podcasts as well. Like you can't do everything and do everything really well. If you build a really good team around you so that they understand what your expectations are, you can let go some of those things. You don't need to be the person that's running the reports, but you need to have your finger on it so that you understand what you're looking at and to know if something seems off. You need to know what your revenue realization rate is. You need to know or denial rate from the health insurance companies. You need to know what your audits are. You need to know what your patient collections are. You need to know those things, but you don't need to be the doctor doesn't need to be the person that runs the report to do
mm,
it and goes through it. Somebody else should be doing that for them, also knowing it, reviewing it, and going, here's the summary of your report this month, right? And know what's going on. And a lot of the businesses, right? They don't need a full-time practice administrator, right? They don't need somebody full-time for 1, 2, or even 3 doctors, especially if they run pretty lean. They have a front desk person and 2 medical assistants, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's all they have. If it's 2, it's usually at least going to be 1 medical assistant or nurse per doctor. Sometimes it's 2, depending on what they see in their clinic. But I offer fractional services for that, right? So let me do your staff training. Let me make sure that those reports are on point. Let me make sure that your contracts are loaded in your system, or that your EMR system is recording things the right way. Or if there's an issue in it, oh, your payment portal isn't coming through, or whatever those kinds of things are. Let me handle those kinds of projects, report to you. You guys let me know what you need, and we handle things that way. So they usually get a day of the week, depending what their actual needs are. But the doctor can't, especially if they want to scale their business,
Yeah.
they can't be in the business role of it and be in the doctor role, because then the pajama time is too much. And they're in their pajamas when they should be hanging out with their family, or just being in their pajamas. They're finishing notes, or they're reviewing reports, or they're looking at real estate, or they're doing too much and they're exhausted and they're burned out and they're like, I don't even like being a doctor anymore.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of it. I think when someone becomes a business owner and they still want to be the podiatrist that's seeing patients, it is a really hard balance.
Yeah,
And sometimes you've got to pull back on one of them. You can't be a full-time podiatrist and also a full-time business
exactly.
owner unless you don't care about the business. If you really just don't care about the business, then I think you can do it. But that's when your business just isn't run very well and you're always replacing staff and there's always problems. And like you said, and then you're always after hours sitting there in your pajamas
Yeah.
doing paperwork
Nobody
at night
wants
when you
that.
should be with your family.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had one client, we were going in to do a training, and there were some newer staff. They acquired another practice. So this was 5 doctors, and they had 3 locations at the time, and they were getting ready to get another location. And offices, absolutely beautiful, state of the art, whatever you needed, absolutely gorgeous. Floors were gorgeous. Big TV, waiting room was open and beautiful. Exam rooms were nice. People were dressed appropriately. Hey, can you guys run me some reports before I come in, just so I understand where some pain points may be? So they get me some reports. In over a 5-year time frame, open on their books was over $300,000 of patient balances that were owed.
Oof.
Doctor didn't know.
Yeah.
Doctor didn't know. It's what, why do you not know that? And the staff said, we didn't know how to read in our system, in our practice management system, that they had a past due balance. And it's like black and white, like right up front. But when they had turnover, nobody trained them. Somebody that was leaving showed them how to use the system a little bit and was like, have at it, good
Yeah.
luck. And they didn't know. And they had some of it was really old. They pleaded ignorance and like, well, we didn't know, and we don't know how to do collections or whatever. So I made a course as soon as I saw that, like a week before I got there. I was like, oh boy. So I made a workshop immediately that started out just for them. And then I've done it a couple of times that's worked out really well, which is really, we have a fee in the US, we have a fee schedule, right? Which is what you bill to insurance,
Yeah.
what your contracted rate is, and then where your adjustment would fall, and it's by insurance company. So if the patient has met their deductible and the doctor sees them for these 3 codes, that code is assigned a price per insurance. Let's do math. So we spent a Friday afternoon and we did math so that they would understand, if the doctor said we did these things, how to calculate that money so they could collect that money at the time of service accurately and not be chasing patients down. But patients were just coming back with old balances and knowing that they could come to the clinic and not have to pay because no one was collecting their money.
Jesus, system in America is complicated sometimes.
So complicated. So complicated. And you got to document A, B, C, and D,
Well,
right?
and it's not just that it's like the American system is complicated compared to Australia, I think, and for what I know, UK and Bermuda and Canada. Yeah, it's a
All
different sort
other
of beast.
countries.
Yeah, all other countries, it's a different beast. But what
But
the point that is really important though is keeping track of people that owe you money. Because even my
yeah,
wife, she's been working in another healthcare industry, and when she first got there, she said, "Wow, I couldn't believe how much their outstanding debts were." And she pointed it out to them, and they went, "Oh, yeah, we know. We just haven't got a process in place." So she got together with the other girl that works there, who used to also work at my podiatry clinic, and the two of them, within about 4 weeks, got something like 70 or 80% of the money back because no one had chased it up and they didn't have a process in place. And they
yeah,
also both went, "We're not booking you in until you pay your bill." And the person went, "Oh, okay." Then they pay the bill and then make the appointment. So I don't think just because the American system is overly complicated with insurance companies, I think this happens in a lot of industries, in a lot of countries where someone will ask for an account and then they just don't have the processes to follow it up properly.
absolutely. I have a cash pay client that we made a couple of changes on. They didn't have an end of day reconciliation
Yeah.
process for their money. So I said, so everything should balance. So there should be zero, nothing should unmatch, right? Oh, we're waiting for insurance. It's cash. If you took $10,000 in cash, you should have it posted somewhere in patient
Oh,
accounts. If
and
you had 10,000,
when you say cash in America, you just mean they pay on the spot.
well, yeah, if we say in the US, we say cash pay, that means it's not going through insurance. So they're
Yeah.
going to pay you time of service, right?
So
They're going to pay
it's
you
not
at time.
necessarily small unmarked bills.
Not
No.
necessarily.
Okay. But it can be.
But let's say for the sake of this conversation, it was greenback, right? That's what we would
Yep.
call it in the US, right? So
Yep.
so let's say you had $10,000 in cash, right? I gave you for their whole day, and you had $10,000 in credit cards, and you had $10,000 in checks. You have $30,000. And you're a cash business, no insurance, people are paying at time of service because that's your policy, right? You come in for your service, you're going to pay that. You're going to get 10 units of Botox, you're paying for that today and the whatever it costs, right? So at the end of the day, your cash drawer should have $30,000, right? And you should have in your system where you post that money
Yeah.
should say 10, 10, and 10 of this kind. If one says 9, you don't write error someplace and just go, I don't know where that money is, and nobody follows up to check on it. Somebody's stealing, or you're bad at math, right?
Yeah. Well,
But
I
like,
had a physiotherapist that I knew, and she had a receptionist working for her who was looking after the bills or not. The physio never looked at any of the figures. And I don't know if it was a conversation we had that then made her go and look at something, or something just it seemed odd. And she worked out in like a 6-month period, this receptionist had stolen something like $28,000
it's
and was
unfortunate.
totally oblivious
Yep.
to it.
And it's unfortunate because you nobody wants to think that anyone will do that, right?
Yeah.
But one, there's just bad people. Like
Yeah,
there's
it's
also
true.
life circumstances that happen, right? Maybe her husband, that receptionist, had a health issue and they couldn't afford the bills and they were doing whatever, and it was just going to be a little bit one time and then I'm going to replace it,
And then they
right? But
get
then
away with
nobody
it.
knew. Or but you've got to have checks and balances, right? Just normal things. So, and that's part of your employee or your, for what I call people, right? People
Yeah,
are the people that make up your practice, right? My 4Ps. People are the people that make up your practice. You need to trust them, but you
definitely.
also need to have those checks and balances in place just in case. Because let's just say that person is super bad at math and their calculator was out of batteries and it didn't work out well and they got busy and something got tucked under the drawer. Like let's just say it's an honest mistake. Just to have somebody to back it up, to make sure that the deposits are consistent and that they're accurate and that they're recorded correctly. Because what if that patient comes back in 2 months and they know they paid $200 for that service they had that day, and they come in and their account reflects that they owe $100,
Hey, that's
and they know
that's
that
how
they
the physio found out about what the receptionist was doing. The patient came back, I think it was a week later, with their receipt and said, "Oh, there's an error on the receipt. Could you fix this up?" And that receptionist wasn't here. When they looked at the receipt number, and this was back when they were doing manual handwritten
Yeah, yeah,
receipts.
yeah.
The number didn't match the current book that they were actually on. She had a separate book that she had hidden somewhere. It was
Secret
a
book.
totally different sequence. And that's how they went through her secret book and found out how much she'd actually taken over a 6-month period.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, right? It's
Mm.
like unfortunate that stuff happens, but it happens. And this is not specific to healthcare, right? Like that's where we have our
Oh,
space is
yeah.
healthcare. This can happen anywhere, but I'm sure at the grocery store, they've got their checks and like it's always a manager that's got to come change out the drawer or there's always in the safe and we don't keep more than $100 or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
They're watching for those kinds of things. Plus, if you have ways for patients to pay online and have a different experience for them, they can get an e-statement or something where they can click it right there. That's going to your bank directly, a secure portal, versus you can only pay in person, right? So there's other ways of doing things, but having those checks and balances in place. And I think podiatrists go to medical school, right? We're not going to business school
Yeah.
most times. There's a few here and there, not just podiatrists, but any physician, right? If they wanted to go to business school, they would have gone to business school and not medical school. And they don't teach it in medical school. I mean, they teach how to have really bad handwriting when you sign a check or your notes, but they don't
Yeah.
teach them. I had a doctor that was getting close to retirement and wanted to pull some reports. And I was helping him pull the reports. And I said, do you use QuickBooks? I can log in remotely. We'll pull those reports. We'll get them to get the valuation performed. He said, what is a QuickBook? I thought, okay, well, do you have an
That's not a
accountant?
good sign.
Yeah. What is a QuickBook?
A quick
It's not
book.
like a little thing that runs really
Like,
fast.
like what's book face? Yes.
Yeah. The Facebook.
The
So
Facebook.
so he had an old school, a big green ledger.
Oh, yeah.
He opens it up. Now, I tell you, he had some of the best kept books that anybody had. One, he asked if he could fax them to me, and I said no, because it's not 1840, so I don't have a fax machine. Why don't you just scan them? I know you have a scanner. When you just scan them and drop them in this folder right here, put them there. So he copied them and mailed them to me, which was fine. And then I scanned them and uploaded them for the business that we were looking to sell. But to my point of doctors don't always know what the business sides of things. Now, I'll say he was spot on. He knew his numbers and they were in there and they were very nicely done, but it's not efficient. He was
Yeah.
spending hours and hours jotting down every single penny that came in. Now, he had a lot of money, he did well, but not efficient and not a productive use of his time, right? His time is more valuable what he could earn per hour than it is for him to be writing out
But
his
also,
books.
if everything is done so manually, and I know there's some, like most of the clinics I know are all electronic. But I remember when they'd all switched over when we were doing everything manually and then switching over to computers, which I thought was fantastic. And then we put processes in place to make sure there were checks on top of checks to make sure nobody could take money. And I used to say to my coaching clients, if you can take money out of your business and think you're clever, I mean, your staff can. Okay, so
Right?
if you've got things in place where you can tweak a couple of numbers here and there, and you can actually take cash out of your business and think you're being smart and ripping off the tax office, if you can do it, then your staff can do it. So
Absolutely.
just be aware. So you've got to have things in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
And I think at least the people that I work with, when we start, they think that they have processes in place until you ask them, what are your processes for this? Nothing's documented.
Yeah.
There isn't really a good process. So sometimes it's just low hanging fruit that's relatively easy to fix and make some things of like, well, what works and what doesn't work? What is working for you? Why do you do it this way? Oh, I don't know. We just always did it that way. Does it work for you? Not really. What would work for you? I'm like a detective. Let's find out why are you if this doesn't work for you, doctor or staff person or both of you, why are we doing it that way? Well, the doctor didn't learn anything about business. Maybe their parent was the doctor and then they went to medical school and now they're the doctor and their kid is going to go to medical school and they're going to be the doctor. But So they just learned old school business, which was when you could just hand jot a note that just said, Mom is Sunday school teacher, sometimes not like an ingrown toenail left. And then it was just stuff so that they could recognize the patient. Some of it had nothing to even do about the condition or whatever, old fashioned. And then the child goes to medical school and then they take over the practice and they just did it the way that their parent did it. And then their kid's going to do it the way they did it without actually reviewing a process, designing a process, tweaking a process, reviewing a process, and making sure that it actually works.
Mm.
On one of your podcasts, you called it a disaster folder, I
I'm a
think.
disaster folder, yeah.
Yeah. So at this event that the North Carolina, they do it every year. So you mentioned states. So states have different conferences every year because they require different number of certified continuing medical education units. So generally each state's going to offer something. So North Carolina does it again every year. The doctors get theirs. They have an assistance program, which is for all other staff members. And one of the things that we're actually going to talk about is disaster planning. So
Yeah.
North Carolina, a month or so ago, had in the mountains of North Carolina, had a crazy historic hurricane that came through the mountains inland and absolutely destroyed towns in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, I do recall
Like
seeing that.
a crazy once in a lifetime kind of thing. Historic flooding. It was already wet. There's big mountains, streams, all kinds of things. So it creates a big issue. A lot of them, even through COVID, hadn't learned that you need to have disaster plan. And now a lot of them are trying to file insurance claims at the same time where everybody else is. And some of them were just without power and internet for a couple of weeks. And so they lost some money with patients, but everybody was safe. Their patients were okay. Their staff members were okay. The office itself was okay. Some of them lost the business, the computers, the everything.
Mm.
And if they were still on a server and not a cloud-based and they had it and their disaster plan didn't include what do you do so that you could be up and running if you lost all your patient files or you lost all your supplies and you lost all of your whatevers that you needed, what is your plan? Did we need new computers? We go and buy this. So a lot of the same stuff that you mentioned in your disaster folder. We love to think that nothing's going to go wrong ever and everything's going to be sunshine and roses. We definitely didn't think that the mountains of North Carolina were going to get hit with a crazy hurricane. Who thinks the mountains are going to that's not even near the coast, that's going to get hit with a hurricane?
Where I'm in Cairns, we actually live on the coast, and cyclones or hurricanes, as you call them, are just something that we live with every year. We're wondering, are we going to get one or how many are we going to get?
Yep.
And we've had some category 5 ones come through, come very close. So that was how the whole disaster folder started.
Yeah.
Was because
You
I
have
thought
to.
if you turned up and your clinic was not there the next day, you should be able to get up and running again within about 48 hours. You should just have a plan in place and your whole team should know what the plan is. So if you're sitting on a beach in Hawaii enjoying yourself and they all rocked up and the place was gone, they know what to do next.
Yep. Absolutely.
And
Where do you get the
call you
computers
and go,
from?
this is what we're doing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about one of those things to get them thinking about there's business stuff that you used to be able to put out a shingle and then you walk down to the GP down the street and you say, hi, I'm Dr. Tyson and I have a new office open. Okay, cool. We'll send you patients, right?
Yeah.
Or an ad in
heaps.
the phone book, right?
Yeah.
You put an ad in the phone book. You can't have an ad in the phone book or just have a website. You've got to have something that is engaging and you just like any business owner, who's your ideal client? Who do you want to walk through that door? Do you do wound care?
Nope.
Why is somebody referring you wound care that you then refer out? Or if there's a doctor maybe 30 or so minutes from me, she doesn't do any surgery. The most surgery she will do in the office is an ingrown toenail procedure. She doesn't want to do any surgery. She has zero desire to do any surgery. So she refers those out to another podiatrist in town who she made friends with, right? Like
Makes
make friends
sense.
with the people that's there and know who that's her ideal client. She 100% knows who her ideal client is. She doesn't want a surgical patient. She doesn't even want them to come to see her as an initial appointment. If they call and say, I have a bunion that's really painful and I'd like to get surgery, her office knows they don't schedule that patient. They say, go see this other doctor. Dr. So and so doesn't treat that type of condition. Oh, my friend said she's so good. She is really good, but
Yeah.
shouldn't see that patient. Unfortunately, she can't help you, but this guy is really good, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera. Like developing those relationships.
I was talking to someone recently and they said, "Oh, I don't do any marketing." I went, "Seriously?" And they said, "No, I don't do any marketing." I went, "Okay, you got a website, haven't you?" They went, "Well, yeah." I said, "Well, that's marketing." I said, and you're not happy with the patients you have at the moment?" They went, "No." I said, "Well, I went to your website and it screams everything you hate. That's what it's telling me." I said, "And now because you don't do any marketing," I said, it's all from word of mouth," because they said, "Oh, I don't need to do any marketing. It's all word of mouth." I said, "But if you don't control the narrative, then you're letting your patients tell other people what it is that you do. And if it's
Yep.
everything you hate, all you're going to do is get more of it. So you need to be controlling what is being said about you. And you do that through marketing.
And it's not as expensive and time consuming as everybody thinks.
It's fun too.
It's sit down and think about it and reevaluate, what do you like to do? Who do you want to see? What's your ideal? Oh, no. Don't
Yeah.
worry about their insurance. Don't worry about their bank account. What do you like to see? I really like X. Okay, fantastic. How do we get those patients to you? Now, I am not like, if I had a client that was like, and I look at those kinds of things and I go, oh boy, we have some work to do, right? And
Mm.
they need a whole other plan. I'm calling Jim. I'm not doing this. I'm not designing their website. I'm not doing that stuff for them. But what we are going to do is educate the team about what they're looking for and how are they going to talk on the phone to a patient that calls for those kinds of things, or what are we going to do? Okay, we can start weeding out those, but we got to bring in these other ones that are your ideal client, and how do we get there? And part of that is bringing in a marketing team. But if they don't have those processes, so for me, like the 4 Ps, it's like a big circle. If you don't have your people in place, the people that work for you in your office, if you don't have that in place, if you don't have your paperwork, which is your EMR, the stuff that you have to do, like all the
Yeah.
stuff that we just talked about, the marketing, the paperwork, the budget, the making sure your finances are on track, the reporting, you don't have your paperwork lined up or efficient. If you don't have your patients' expectations being met, because you don't have any processes, none of those things are going to fall into place anyway. And then if you don't have the processes, your people don't have their expectations, your paperwork is going to be inconsistent across the board. Your patients aren't going to have a good experience. They're not going to want to come back. And it's just going to come back to, what's the problem? I didn't have good processes in place. This is not rocket science, right? It's not, but because they're so focused on, oh, I'm a doctor, I'll get to it later, I'm really busy. To me, I don't like the word of saying I'm really busy. Everybody's really busy. We all have the same number of hours in the day, whether you're down under or not. It's the
Yeah.
same number of hours. How you use those hours, but what do you make a priority? You can say, you know what? I didn't make this a priority. I'm busy, but I didn't make this a priority. If that one doctor you said he's not getting his right clients, well, he's not making marketing a priority because he doesn't think that he needs to make it a priority. If he draws out a little calendar of things to do of that are important to him and then outsource that to somebody else, you don't have to have the weight of the whole thing on you all the time, doctor. You don't have to do, you don't have to do that. Why don't you just love to do the stuff that you enjoy? And if you love doing the business side of it, fantastic. But hire a doctor that can come in and treat the patients and that
Mm.
doesn't want to do that.
I think part of the
Uh,
problem is I think some podiatrists are scared to take the plunge and let some patients go and just focus on the patients that they want to have. And they go, oh yeah, this is what I like doing. But if I let these go, I make X amount of money from them. And they don't realize, but if you let them go, that will free up time in your schedule that you'll be able to fit more of what you want to. And that's when I'm sitting down with coaching clients and we're going over their ideal client and how they're currently marketing, what changes they need to make. This is the hardest part I find talking with someone, especially when they're a new coaching client, is getting them to realize you need to let something go if you want to get something else in. It's no different to life in general. If you're overweight, if you're unhealthy and you want to get fitter, you want to get healthier, you have to allow time to exercise.
Yep.
So you have to not watch as much TV, or you need to get up earlier, or you need to leave work a little bit earlier. You need to fit exercise in. You've got to let something else go. If you want better patients, you've got to let some of the bad ones go to fit in the better patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's better for the practice, right? It's better for the practice. It's better for you to want to be happier in what you do. And change is hard, right? Change is scary. Change is hard because the devil that we know is better than the devil that we don't know. And if I stop seeing these kinds of patients that I hate, that I don't like, that don't bring me joy, it's going to be awful. Like I'm going to lose my whole practice. That's not the reason that you're going to lose your whole practice, right? The reason that you're not likely going to lose your whole practice, you're probably successful in spite of it because there's a need for people to go and see different types of providers. But wouldn't you rather be better? Think about it. If I'm talking to a client, they're a doctor. When you go to another doctor's office, what are your expectations when you go to their office? If you walked in and had the experience that you told me about when you went to see that orthopedic surgeon and it was difficult to get in and out, you didn't know what your expectations were, the person at the front desk wasn't super nice, you just sit down, they ran behind, the doctor was all disheveled and didn't seem to pay a lot of attention to you, would that be a good experience? But it hurts and it's hard to really take a look at yourself that same way. But if you feel like your expectations aren't being met if you were to go into your office, you have to take that hard look, whether you hire myself or a secret shopper to go in and be a fake patient and tell them about the experience, or do it yourself and really take a hard look and go, oof, God, this waiting room looks terrible. In the United States, there's a restaurant called the Waffle House. Have you heard of the Waffle House?
I have.
It's usually, it's like it's an all 24-hour, like a diner. Generally, you're going to see people there 2, 3 a.m. after they've had a night of drinking, right? It's that kind of place. But there's always a light out on one of the signs, and you're like, that's going to be some shady characters. But that light that's always out always seems to be the W, and it's the Awful House, right? People joke, they call it the Awful House, right? But they're still going there,
That's funny.
even though the eggs were greasy and the bacon wasn't crispy and whatever it is, but they didn't care because they had a few drinks and they got what they needed at the time. And they'll say the next morning they feel terrible, not just from the drinking, but from the food. They're like, oh my God, it was so greasy. I'm never going there again.
But
and in 3 months or next year, they'll go back. You don't want your practice to be the Awful House. You don't want a light out in your sign. You don't want it to look gross when people come in. You want to be, that's your business, that's your name on the door. You want to be proud when you walk in there. And if doctors are always using the back door instead of coming in that front door that the patients come in, they might not even know that nobody cleans up in the front, or that the paint is all chipping and jacked up from chairs hitting it, or
could be a body
whatever.
out there, you wouldn't know.
You know,
I always joke and say that you should go out the front and have a look, because what if there's a dead bird that's banged into the door and it's dead at your steps and it's just decaying over a couple of weeks? And I used to joke around about it. And then I was going to my physio and there was a dead bird near the front door. And I went, oh. So I took a photo of it. And because I just happened to I was about to do a marketing workshop. So I took a photo of the dead bird. But then every time I went back there, I just kept seeing this dead bird decay more, and the cars were driving over it until eventually it just looked like someone had dropped a bag of flour because it
And
just
that's all
decayed
you can,
down to nothing. But every time I went through there, I just kept checking the dead bird. To me,
and
I
that's
found
all
it
you think about.
yeah, I thought it was amusing because I keep talking about the dead bird,
Yeah,
but
there was.
it is
You
really, really
manifested
important.
that to happen.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
But then that's all you think about, right? So once you see something or you hear a name or you're like, oh, I really like that new car. What is that? Now you see them all the time, right? Or you
Mm,
you learned a new word and you hear it all the time. And you're like, I've never even heard that word before. But once you become aware of something, sometimes you see it all the time. Now, like you see that dead bird and you're going to that office, and that's the only thing that you think of every time you go. And you're like, wonder how now you're like, it's a challenge. I wonder how long it's going to take for somebody to pick that up and get that out of the parking lot.
no, it stayed there until
Nope,
it
not
turned
this
into
week.
flour. No.
Not this week. It had never happened because somebody didn't care enough to once a week to go out that way and see what the patients see. And it's hard, change is hard, but take that step back and go, if this is the experience, if I was to come here as a patient, is this the experience that I want to
Mm,
have? And if the answer is no, manage change like small. It doesn't have, you don't have to do everything at one time. Like pick the dead bird up. Start there. You don't have to replace the parking lot, but just
yeah.
pick up the dead bird,
Sweep up the
right? Just
cigarette butts, pick up the
yeah,
paper. Sometimes there can be a poo
yeah,
sitting there near the door. Could be
yep.
human, could be a dog. You do not know.
Hopefully it's the dog.
Hopefully it's a dog. But yeah, sometimes you've got to question it when the size of them, big dog.
Yeah.
So
I have a big dog, so yeah, I get it.
you need to check on these things. And people always say, oh, no, that wouldn't happen. Well, I always say, if you have a car park and you're responsible for that car park, you need to make sure it looks good all the time. If you're not responsible for it, you need to be onto your landlord to make sure it looks good all the time, because even if you're not responsible for it, it reflects on you.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. If there's a stone broken, right, the curb part where you pull your
yeah,
car up to, if that's broken, or the entryway for the wheelchair access has a board that's off, even if it's not, isn't it ultimately your responsibility? If it's your name on the door, even if it's under your lease or whatever for somebody else to make sure it's done, but you can't always wait, right? You call, you and if it's not done, like sometimes you just have to do it because
mm,
those are your patients, those are your people that you're seeing there that ultimately create your reputation for you.
that's true. So Sarah, before we wrap up, is there anything you want to touch on before we finish? If people want to get hold
Yeah.
of you, what's the best way of doing it?
Yeah. So for people to contact me, I have a website. It's sarahclarkconsulting.com. I do send out a monthly newsletter. We touch on 4 Ps on there. And I do joke that I say I help to turn chaos into calmer, because it's
Yeah,
never really going to be calm, is it? Like if a medical practice was completely calm, we'd be nervous.
that'd be
But my
boring.
website is sarahclarkconsulting.com. I'm also on LinkedIn where I can be found. I do have a newsletter there, and I have a blog on my website, and I do send a newsletter out so they can subscribe on there. On my website does have a free tool where practices, anyone can come on and just do a free little assessment, and I
Okay.
get them some free actionable tips around these 4 Ps on some things that they could take action day one in their office without creating a big, hubbub of change in there. I also offer some assessments. So if they're interested, they can complete that right there on the website. It emails to me directly, and would love to just chat or help those clients out. And I did mention briefly, the North Carolina Foot and Ankle Society is doing their annual symposium in January this of 25. It's the 16th through the 19th. They do offer 25 continuing education units for podiatrists in medical space. They do have a really good assistance program this year. I will be heading that up, and we'll have a full day program on January 17th with a specific dinner meeting also for office managers to do some networking and kind of learn from other managers outside of their little silo without the doctors around. Would love to have some people come and attend.
Well, I'll put all that information in the show notes as well. So if people want to go and check it out, remember, go to podiatrylegends.com, look for the show notes, and it'll all be there, or whatever podcast platform you're listening to. Usually all the links will be there as well. So Sarah, I want to thank you for coming on the Podiatry Legends podcast, sharing your wisdom with us today. And hopefully I'll catch up with you at some stage in person, just like Big Jim did.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Tyson. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.